Get out of my son's house right now, you fruitless woman.
The Hartley mansion blazed with lights and laughter. Gerald had thrown the grandest party the neighborhood had ever seen, a celebration for his 3 new grandchildren. But in the corner, Marcus watched the dancing and joy with cold, calculating eyes. This celebration would be short-lived. He'd make sure of it. Thanks very much for stopping by. I really appreciate you all for watching. Please let us know the country you are watching from. Thanks, and God bless you as you do so. Tables overflowed with food. Musicians filled the air with joyful melodies. Neighbors and relatives who had once mocked Nia now crowded around her, cooing over the triplets, offering congratulations that felt hollow after years of cruelty. Gerald stood at the center of it all, holding baby David, his chest puffed with pride. "My grandson," he announced to anyone who would listen. "After all these years, the Hartley name continues." Nelson's mother wept tears of joy, cradling little Grace. Even distant relatives had traveled to witness the miracle, the barren woman who had given birth to triplets exactly 10 years after her wedding. Nia smiled, accepting their apologies and well wishes with grace she didn't feel. Something felt wrong. She could feel eyes watching her. Marcus's eyes. He stood apart from the celebration, his wife beside him looking nervous. While everyone else danced and celebrated, Marcus nursed a drink, his jaw tight, his mind working. His father had just announced plans to update his will to include provisions for Nelson's children. Everything Marcus had worked for, everything he'd carefully orchestrated for a decade, was crumbling before his eyes. Those children shouldn't exist. Marcus drained his glass and pulled out his phone. He had one card left to play. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his father's house early, before Nelson and Nia awoke. His face was grave, concerned. "Father, we need to talk about those children." Marcus closed the study door behind him, shutting out the sounds of the sleeping household. Gerald looked up from his morning tea, confused by his son's serious expression. "What's wrong?" he asked. Marcus leaned forward, his voice drumming to a conspiratorial whisper. "Everything." "Father, I'm happy for Nelson, truly I am, but something doesn't add up," Marcus began, his tone perfectly calibrated, concerned brother, not jealous villain. "What are you talking about? We have 3 healthy grandchildren. What more is there to understand?" 10 years, Father. 10 years of nothing. Every doctor said they were both healthy, yet nothing. Then they disappear for 2 years, completely vanish, and suddenly return with triplets? Paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Doesn't that strike you as convenient?" Gerald's frown deepened. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Marcus said carefully. "I'm just saying we should be certain, for the family's sake." Gerald set down his teacup slowly. "You think those children aren't Nelson's?" "I think," Marcus chose his words with surgical precision, "Nia was desperate, humiliated. She disappeared for 2 years with no contact. Who knows what she did in that time? Maybe she found another solution, adoption, a donor, something." "That's a serious accusation, Marcus." "That's why I'm not accusing anyone," Marcus replied smoothly. "I'm just saying there's an easy way to remove all doubt. A DNA test. If I'm wrong, we'll never speak of this again. But if I'm right..." He let the sentence trail off ominously. Gerald stared at his eldest son for a long moment. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Arrange it, quietly. We'll use Dr. Adeyemi. He's handled our family matters for years." Nelson stared at his father in disbelief. They stood in Gerald's study again, this time with Nelson and Nia summoned like defendants before a judge. "A DNA test? You want me to prove my own children are mine?" His voice cracked with hurt and rage. "It's just a formality. Gerald said, though his tone lacked conviction. Mark Nelson's head whipped toward his brother, who stood by the window looking appropriately concerned. Of course this is coming from you. Marcus raised his hands defensively. Brother, I only want what's best for the family. You disappeared for 2 years, no contact. Then suddenly, triplets? You have to admit it's unusual. Nia's hands trembled as she held Grace closer. How dare you? These are our children, after everything we've been through. Then the test should be easy, Marcus interrupted smoothly. If there's nothing to hide, what's the problem? Nelson wanted to refuse. Every fiber of his being screamed that this was wrong, insulting, a violation of everything sacred. But he could see the doubt creeping into his father's eyes. He could see his mother fidgeting nervously in the corner. The whispers had already started among the extended family. He'd heard the hushed conversations at yesterday's party. Fine, Nelson said finally, his voice hollow. We'll do your test, but when it proves I'm their father, Marcus, you and I are going to have a very different conversation. Marcus smiled sympathetically. I hope you're right, brother. I truly do. The lie rolled off his tongue like honey. Dr. Ediemi arrived that afternoon with his testing kit. He swabbed the baby's cheeks, then Nelson's. Marcus watched from the doorway, his phone already warming in his pocket. 5 days of waiting. 5 days of whispered conversations and suspicious glances from the Hartley family. 5 days of Nia barely sleeping, clutching her babies as if someone might snatch them away. Then Dr. Adiemi called. His voice was strangely flat when he spoke. The results are ready. The entire Hartley family gathered in Gerald's living room. Nelson held the envelope Dr. Adiemi had delivered, his hands shaking. Nia sat beside him, her face drained of color. Marcus stood near his father, his expression perfectly neutral, concerned, hopeful, but prepared for bad news. Open it, Gerald commanded. Nelson tore open the envelope. His eyes scanned the document once, twice, 3 times, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something different. The paper slipped from his fingers. No, he whispered. No, this isn't possible. Nia grabbed the document, her eyes flooding with tears as she read the bold text at the bottom. Paternity probability 0%. Nelson Hartley is not the biological father. The room erupted. I knew it. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos, perfectly timed. I knew something was wrong. Gerald snatched the document, his face darkening with rage. Explain this, Nelson. Explain how you bring 3 children into my house claiming they're Hartleys when they're not your blood. This is wrong, Nia sobbed. The test is wrong. These are our children. I gave birth to them. I carried them for 9 months. Or you adopted them, Marcus interjected, his voice rising with false righteousness. Liar! Nelson lunged at his brother, but Gerald's security staff held him back. Gerald's voice boomed like thunder. Get out, both of you. You've disgraced this family with your lies and your fake children. You are no longer Hartleys. Get out!
Gerald Hartley didn't just disown his son privately, he made it a spectacle. Within 24 hours, an announcement appeared in the city's major newspapers. Gerald Hartley hereby severs all familial, financial, and legal ties with Nelson Hartley, effective immediately. The humiliation was deliberate and complete. Nelson and Nia's world collapsed overnight. The apartment they'd been living in, owned by the Hartley Family Trust, evicted within 48 hours. Nelson's position at the family company, terminated. His access cards deactivated. His office cleared out and locked before he could even collect his belongings. Their bank accounts, which had family connections, frozen pending investigation. Even their church received calls, whispers that Nelson and Nia had perpetrated a fraud, lied about the children's parentage, manipulated an elderly man's emotions for inheritance money. At the market, former friends crossed the street to avoid them. Neighbors who'd attended the celebration now pretended not to see them. The same people who'd cooed over the triplets now whispered, adopted, probably bought them. Nia sat in their tiny rented room, all they could afford now, nursing Grace while the boys slept in a single borrowed crib. Tears streamed silently down her face. "How can a test be wrong?" she whispered. "I gave birth to them, Nelson. I felt them growing inside me. I felt every kick, every movement. These are our children." Nelson stared at the DNA report, reading it for the 100th time. Something felt wrong. Across town, Marcus stood in his lavish home, champagne glass raised, celebrating with his wife. No more competition. It's all mine now. But while Marcus celebrated, Nelson sat hunched over the bar counter, his third drink untouched before him. The amber liquid blurred in his vision. Or maybe those were tears. He'd lost everything. His family, his name, his dignity. He didn't even notice when his two closest friends slid onto the stools beside him. "Nelson, man, we've been looking everywhere for you," James said softly, signaling the bartender to bring water instead. His other friend, Tunde, placed a hand on Nelson's shoulder. "Brother, you can't let this destroy you. Those babies need their father." "I'm not their father," Nelson said bitterly, his words slurring slightly. "The test proved it. Scientific evidence. DNA doesn't lie." "But people do," James countered. Nelson's head snapped up. "What?" "Think about it," Tunde urged, leaning closer. 10 years of trying, 2 years apart, then suddenly triplets? You know those are your children. You and Nia never even separated during those 2 years. You were together the whole time. "The DNA test was done by your family's doctor," Nelson interrupted. Nelson's foggy mind began to clear. You think Marcus manipulated?" "I'm saying take another test, a different hospital, a different doctor, one your family has no connection to. If the results are the same, then fine, but what if they're not?" Nelson stared at his friends. "Dr. Adeyemi is one of the best in the city. He's been our family physician for 20 years. "Exactly," James said quietly. Nelson sat in silence, the fog of alcohol lifting from his mind. Finally, he pushed the drink away and stood. "Find me a hospital, tomorrow. We test again." The new hospital was across town, sterile, modern, with no connection to the Hartley family name. Nelson held baby David while the technician swabbed his cheek, then the baby's. His hands trembled. What if the results were the same? What if he really wasn't their father? 3 days later, Nelson sat in the hospital's consultation room, the envelope burning in his hands. Nia couldn't come. She was too afraid, too broken to face another rejection. He opened it. His eyes found the bold text at the bottom. Paternity probability, 99.99%. Nelson Hartley is the biological father. The paper fell from his hands. That's impossible," he whispered. "The other test said—" "Mr. Hartley," the doctor interrupted gently, "I can assure you our results are accurate. We ran the test twice to be certain. You are definitively the father of this child." Nelson's mind reeled. One test said no. This test said yes. Both couldn't be right. Unless... "I want to test the other two," Nelson said urgently. "My other children, right now." The doctor nodded. 2 more tests, 2 more agonizing days of waiting. Both came back positive, 99.99% probability. He was the father of all 3 children. Nelson's shock turned to cold, crystallizing rage. He went to a 3rd hospital without telling anyone. Same results, positive. Then a 4th hospital, positive again.
4 different hospitals, 4 identical results, all confirming what he'd known in his heart from the moment he'd held his children. They were his. Which meant the first test, Dr. Adeyemi's test, was a lie. Nelson's hands clenched into fists. He picked up his phone and called Dr. Adeyemi's office. "I need another test, tomorrow, in this..."
Dr. Adeyemi's face went pale the moment Nelson walked through his clinic door. The doctor's hand froze mid-reach for a file, his eyes widening with something that looked remarkably like fear. "Nelson," he stammered, I wasn't expecting you. What are you doing here?" "I want to run the DNA test again," Nelson said calmly, though his eyes were ice. "Right now, all 3 children." The doctor's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Nelson, we already conducted that test. The results were conclusive. Then it should be easy to replicate them, unless there's a problem." No problem," Dr. Adeyemi said quickly, too quickly. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air-conditioned room. "It's just unnecessary, a waste of resources." "I'm paying," Nelson said flatly, "and I'm not leaving until it's done." The doctor hesitated, then nodded shakily. "Of course. Let me prepare the equipment." Nelson watched the doctor's every move like a hawk. He saw the trembling hands, the nervous glances toward the door, the way Dr. Adeyemi fumbled with the equipment he'd handled thousands of times. The swabs were taken, the samples labeled. Nelson made the doctor initial each one in his presence. "Results in 5 days." 3, Nelson corrected. "And I want them delivered personally, to me, not to my father's house." 5 days later, the envelope arrived. Nelson opened it immediately. Paternity probability, 0%. Negative. Nelson stared at the doctor, who couldn't meet his eyes. "Interesting," Nelson said quietly, "because 4 other hospitals say otherwise." Dr. Adeyemi's face crumbled. Nelson pulled out his phone and showed him the other test results, all positive, all legitimate. "I'm giving you one chance to tell the truth. Who paid you to lie?" Nelson walked out of Dr. Adeyemi's office with both test results in hand, 1 negative, 4 positive. The evidence was damning. He didn't go home. He went straight to the police station with his lawyer, James, by his side. "I want to file charges for fraud and conspiracy." The police took the case seriously. Medical fraud involving paternity results was a criminal offense, one that could destroy lives, families, and inheritances. Dr. Adeyemi was brought into the station within hours, his confident demeanor from his pristine clinic completely gone. In the harsh fluorescent lights of the interrogation room, he looked like what he was, a frightened man who'd made a terrible mistake. "Dr. Adeyemi," the detective began, spreading the conflicting DNA results across the table. "You conducted this test showing Mr. Hartley is not the father, but 4 other accredited hospitals confirm he is the father. All tests conducted within the same month. How do you explain this discrepancy?" The doctor's hands shook. There must have been a lab error." "Don't insult us," James, Nelson's lawyer, cut in sharply. "Lab errors don't produce fabricated results. They produce inconclusive results. Your report is definitive and definitively false. That's not an error, that's fraud." The detective leaned forward. "Doctor, falsifying medical documents is a serious crime, but cooperating with this investigation could reduce your sentence significantly. Who paid you to alter these results?" Dr. Adeyemi's resistance crumbled. Tears streamed down his face. "I didn't want to. He threatened me, said he'd ruin my practice, destroy my reputation." "Who?" Nelson roared, slamming his hand on the table. The doctor flinched. Marcus Hartley paid me for everything." The room went silent. "Everything?" the detective asked carefully. "What else did Marcus Hartley pay you to do?" Dr. Adeyemi's next words would shatter the entire Hartley family forever. The interrogation room felt smaller with each passing hour. Dr. Adiemi sat under the harsh lights, his expensive suit now wrinkled and sweat-stained. The detective wasn't gentle anymore. "Tell us everything, Doctor. Every single detail of your arrangement with Marcus Hartley from the very beginning." Dr. Adiemi's voice cracked as he spoke. "It started 10 years ago. Marcus came to my office late one night, after hours. He said he needed help with a family matter." Nelson leaned forward, his entire body tense. "He told me his brother Nelson was trying to have children, and he needed to make sure that never happened. He offered me money, a lot of money, enough to pay off my clinic's debts and then some." "What did he ask you to do?" the detective pressed. The doctor's head dropped into his hands. "I gave him the medication," Dr. Adiemi continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus said he would add it to Nelson's food during their weekly family dinners. Small doses, consistent doses, enough to keep him sterile without him ever knowing why." "For how long?" James demanded. 7 years, the doctor admitted. Every single week, for 7 years, Marcus poisoned his own brother. Nelson's hands clenched into fists. Everything made sense now. The mysterious infertility, the years of negative pregnancy tests, the doctors who could find nothing wrong. Because there was nothing wrong. He was being poisoned. "And the DNA test?" the detective asked. "Marcus called me when Nelson returned with the triplets. He panicked. He paid me $50,000 to falsify the results, to destroy Nelson's credibility completely." The detective stood. "Bring Marcus Hartley in now. Arrest him immediately." Marcus Hartley sat in the back of the police car, handcuffs biting into his wrists, watching his perfect life crumble through the window. His mansion, his luxury cars, his position as heir to the Hartley fortune, all of it slipping away with every mile toward the station. The interrogation was brutal. Marcus tried denial first. "This is absurd. That doctor is lying to save himself." The detective slid a bank statement across the table. $50,000 transferred from your account to Dr. Adiemi's 3 days after the DNA test. Care to explain? Marcus's jaw tightened. "That was for medical services. We have your phone records. 17 calls between you and Dr. Adiemi in the 2 weeks before Nelson returned with his children. What were you discussing, Mr. Hartley?" More evidence piled up. Text messages, financial transfers, pharmacy records showing Dr. Adiemi had been prescribing the sterilization medication for years, medication with no legitimate patient attached to it. Finally, after 6 hours of interrogation, Marcus broke. "Fine," he shouted, his polished facade shattering. "Yes, I did it, all of it. I gave him the drugs every Sunday dinner for 7 years. I paid the doctor to fake the DNA test. What was I supposed to do? Just watch my useless brother inherit everything?" The confession was recorded, documented, undeniable. The trial was swift, the evidence overwhelming. Dr. Adiemi received 5 years for attempted fraud, conspiracy, and assault by poisoning. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. "You poisoned your own brother out of greed. You destroyed a family for money." Gerald Hartley sat in the gallery, aged 10 years in a single moment. His golden son, a monster. His rejected son, the victim. Everything he believed had been a lie. The courtroom emptied, but Gerald Hartley remained seated, staring at his hands. Hands that had signed the disownment papers. Hands that had pushed away an innocent son. Outside, Nelson stood with Naya and their triplets, finally vindicated, finally free. But the hardest conversation was still waiting. Gerald emerged from the courthouse, his proud shoulders now slumped with shame.
His security team kept the press back, but he waved them away. He walked slowly toward Nelson, each step heavy with regret. "Nelson," his voice cracked. "Son." Nelson held baby David closer, his face unreadable. Naya stood beside him, protective, her pain still fresh and raw. "I don't know where to begin," Gerald continued, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I believed Marcus. I chose cruelty over faith. I threw you out, humiliated you publicly, called your children illegitimate." His voice broke completely. "I am so deeply, unforgivably sorry." The street fell silent. Even the reporters stopped shouting, sensing something sacred unfolding. Nelson stared at his father, the man who'd raised him, loved him, then destroyed him with a single announcement in the newspaper. "You didn't just disown me," Nelson said quietly. "You made my wife, a woman who'd suffered for 10 years, carry that shame publicly. You called our miracle children frauds. You sided with the son who poisoned me over the son who loved you." Gerald nodded, accepting every word like a blow. "I know, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn back what I destroyed." Naya touched Nelson's arm gently. Her eyes, though still wounded, held something that looked like forgiveness beginning to bloom. Nelson looked at his children, David, Daniel, and Grace, innocent miracles who deserved to know their grandfather. He extended his hand. "We start over. Slowly. With honesty this time."
3 months later, the Hartley mansion was alive again, but this time with genuine joy. Gerald had publicly apologized through every newspaper that had carried Nelson's disgrace. The family businesses were restored to Nelson's name. Marcus sat in prison, his greed costing him everything. But the greatest restoration wasn't financial, it was familial. Nia stood in the garden where she'd once hidden her tears, now watching Gerald gently rock baby Grace while Nelson's mother sang lullabies to the boys. The same family that had broken her had learned the cost of cruelty, and in their brokenness they'd found humility. Nelson wrapped his arms around his wife. "We survived," he whispered. "No," Nia corrected, her eyes on their 3 miracles. "We won." 10 years of mockery, 2 years of separation, one brother's evil scheme. But in the end, truth had prevailed, justice had been served, and love, patient, faithful, unbreakable love, had conquered all. What did you think of this incredible journey? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Did Marcus get what he deserved? Should Gerald have been forgiven? Tell us which country you're watching from. And if this story touched your heart, smash that subscribe button, hit the like, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that miracles still happen. See you in the next story.